So this is Subola, and I want to introduce Tammie Schrader from the state of Washington, who's going to tell us a little bit about her journey in terms of serious games. So Tammie, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, so good morning and welcome, and it's very strange to be staring at a computer and not seeing faces. It's not normally how I present, but this is my story about going from really I am a non-gamer to now implementing gaming 59 school districts wide in the state, as well as now overreaching some of our borders, and by borders I'll explain what I mean when I get there. So please feel free to type in any questions, and I'll try to answer as the presentation goes along, because I think that might be easier if your questions come when it's pertinent to what I'm talking about. So my journey began with a kid named Tim in an email, and I'm a 7th grade life science teacher. I have a biology degree. I teach 7th grade in Cheney, Washington, which is a somewhat smaller district. We serve about almost 3,000 kids district-wide, which is elementary, junior high, and high school. And so what happened to me is we are doing a review one day on science terms, cells, biology. Actually, it was plant cells, if I remember correctly. It was about 7 or 8 years ago. So I have a student, his name is Tim, and Tim is really, really smart. But Tim doesn't engage much with my curriculum, right? Great kid, not a behavior problem, really bright, just kind of, I'm a Schrader, just kind of didn't get that work done type of kid, but really, really a great kid. So one day I give this review assignment, and 24 hours later, Tim walks into my class and he hands me a thumb drive. And kids are making games, right? They're building games to do kind of a review around cellular biology. And Tim hands me this thumb drive, and I smile at him and I say, so what do you want me to do with this? Do you have money you want printed? Do you have instructions you've typed up? And he smiles and says, hey, no, I hacked into Mario. And my first thought is, I think that might be illegal. The second thought is, I was so excited he had done something right. So I put this Mario game on my smart board that is, hooked to my wall. And I didn't know Mario very well. So what I know about Mario now is that he runs along, he jumps up, he grabs a coin. Well, there were questions attached to that coin around cells. And if the kid got it right, he got the coin. If they got it wrong, he went down a tube and it asked him a different question. And so on and so on. So what I noticed was I hooked up this game. Kids were coming in, kids that I didn't even serve. Like there were 3 7th grade teachers in our building. Kids that I didn't even serve within a day were coming in the morning. They're coming in at lunch. They're coming in after school, and they're wanting to spend all this time on this game around cells. And I remember calling my principal down, and I said, I don't think I'm serving our kids the way that they want to learn, because this is engaging them where I don't think I've ever thought about using games. So the second thing that happened was an email came within a month, right, from a company called Filament Games, and they emailed and said, and it was a countrywide email, as far as I know. I got it from our curriculum director, and she said, hey, do you want to try this bacteria game around? It was bacteria and viruses. And I said, called my principal down, and I said, I think we should try this. So we did. So I asked the kids, you willing to try this? Absolutely. I mean, they were beyond thrilled, right? So here's what happened. The kids were, and it was, you guys, this was the beginning version of this game, and they were quite clear about that. So the kids were playing this game, and I have to tell you, I spent 3 hours one evening trying to figure out how the mechanism of this game, right? Because I was so worried that kids were going to ask me about game mechanisms, and I wouldn't know how to answer because I don't game. So I spent 3 hours one evening working on this. So the next day came along, and we logged all the kids in, and of course, Filament had a protocol, right? You take a pre-test, you play the game, you take a post-test. So kids took the pre-test, we hook them up with the game, and what I noticed was not a single kid asked me about the mechanisms of the game, not one. So that's 3 hours of my life I'm never going to get back. They would ask me questions around the science, around bacteria and viruses when they got stuck, but they did not talk to me about gaming. So that was a really big learning curve for me. And the other thing that happened was I was worried that kids would start playing and get very involved, and I would just see a bunch of kids hooked to this computer screen. And that didn't happen. These kids were collaborating with each other. They're yelling across the room at each other. They're trying to figure out this game collectively. And it was actually really, really powerful. And I have some stories around that. In that one of my kids who was extremely autistic, and really I struggled with educating him, he became the superstar that day because he could figure out the game with no problem where other people were getting stuck, right? So then everybody wanted to be his friend because he was running around trying to help people. And it was just a magical experience for me as a teacher. But here's the other thing that happened. The kids are listening to the game, playing the game, and they start giving me feedback. And they say, you know, Ms. Schrader, this isn't very entertaining. They didn't like this, they didn't like that. So I said to them, you know what? We are going to make this a science experiment, right? This game is being marketed to you. So you don't get to tell me what's not working or that it doesn't work. You have to tell me, A, how to make it better, and B, why it doesn't work. And Philman hadn't asked me to do that. It was just on the fly. We were talking about it, and that's what makes good science, right? So give me your evidence of what's not working. So they made comments, and I did say, you have to be kind, you have to be specific, and you have to be helpful, because you can imagine middle schoolers giving feedback, right? So they did, and I will be honest, I started typing all of this data around what didn't work around the game for them, like things like, you know, the music is elevator music and that just doesn't work for us, and just different, like they should have level ups and some things. And I'll be honest, some of the things I was typing I didn't even understand, like they were talking about prizes and this and that, and as a non-gamer I wasn't even sure I understood everything, but I made sure to capture their thoughts. So the next thing that happened is Filament called me to do their end of research, you know, discussion with me, and I said to them, hey, I've got all this feedback from these kids about the game, because they were asking me for feedback, and I said, you know what, that game it doesn't speak to me, but I can tell you what the kids said. So I forwarded like 8 pages of stuff to them, and they offered me an NSF Fellowship to come back to Madison for a summer and give them feedback on, they were building their games, so I became a science like consultant for them. And in the meantime, you know, they paid me through this grant. I gave them feedback on the science content of their games so that it was accurate. And in the meantime, I was supposed to work on a project, right, of my own choosing. Well, one of the things that happened, and I learned quickly, that programmers are programmers and teachers are teachers, right? And sometimes those cross over and sometimes they don't. So it was really fun to be in, first of all, in a company where like the average age was 20 something and I'm 50, and I'm an extrovert, and I'm in a company full of introverted programmers, right? So that was really, I learned a lot. And so what happened to me was this. I am trying to explain to them phases of the moon, because I also teach earth science. And as I'm running around a table carrying a moon in my hands, trying to get them to visibly see why the moon changes phases, and looking at the universe there, and I call him a kid. He's 20, I think he was 24, but he seemed so young. But at one point he was on his computer in the corner as I'm running around this table, and he turns to me and he says, oh my gosh, I didn't get that question right, because I had given him a pretest, so I knew, you know, where the misconceptions lie. And so I say to him, you know, I saw your answer, and yes, I know, but by the way, I still love you and it'll still be okay. So what he did was, he said, Tammie, will you come over and take a look at this? And he had, in a few minutes, programmed an Earth, a moon, and a sun on his computer. And so while I'm busy trying to explain that to him in his language, which is a program, the other light bulb came on where I thought, you know what, we should be teaching kids to use programming to explain their reasoning, right? So I started working on a project around how I do that. Well, it was great. I had a whole company full of programmers that were helping me, right? And so I went back to my school at the end of the summer, and I said to my boss, I want to start using Scratch, much like I use PowerPoint and Word documents and Excel. I want to teach Scratch to kids so that when I ask them to explain things to me, they can use Scratch. Well, he said, okay, great, give it a shot. So I said, I'm going to do it every Friday when I have short periods, right? Because we had a late start Friday. So I taught 2 lessons, 2. And the kids went crazy. I mean, they were going home and programming for hours and hours and hours, and I couldn't keep up with them. And they were doing great things. So I would say things like, okay, I would be teaching mitosis and meiosis, and I would say, okay, program me what happens to these chromosomes. And it really took off, and kids were loving it, but something happened. I had a handful of kids come to me, and they said, you know, Ms. Schrader, we love this Scratch thing, but here's the problem. We really want to learn to program, like Python. Well, I don't know how to program Python. But luckily, I live less than a mile down the street from Eastern Washington University. And I happen to have the department head, the computer science department head's daughter a couple years earlier. So I contacted him and I said, hey, I need some help. And he said, great, we've got a computer science club. I'm going to send some kids down, and we formed an after-school club for these kids. And what is really great is these kids are computer scientists, right? So I got to do the educational piece, and they taught us Python, and I actually sat with kids and learned Python with them. So that came about, but this other thing came about where there is a way to program video games, right? So we run electives at our middle school, and I said to my boss, this was great, I said to my boss, it was my vice principal, and I said, hey, I think we ought to use this game store mechanic, and I think we ought to go ahead and teach an elective. And it was really cute because he is a gamer and he's young and brilliant. But anyway, he says to me, I'll never forget, I'm standing in his office, and he logs on and is looking at it. And he says, yeah, I think we ought to do this next quarter. And I said, so like next quarter is next week? And he goes, yeah, it'll be okay. And I said, I've never even looked at this. And he goes, no, Tammie, really, go do it. It'll be fine. So I cleared the computer lab. And what was really crazy is when I went to my counselor, I said, hey, we want to change electives for next quarter, which is next week. She looked at me, and when I told her what we want to do, she said, you understand every kid in this building is going to be lined up. And I said, yeah, I think that's a good thing. And then I went to the librarian. I said, I need the computer lab 5th period. And he said, when he asked what I was doing, and I told him, he says, oh my gosh, can I come in and sit in and do it too? And do you have a name for the class? And I looked at him, I said, I just was told 10 minutes ago I'm teaching it. I have no name. Well, let me tell you, within 10 minutes he comes to our, and he says, we're going to call it the Gaming Garage. And he made up a logo and wanted to print t-shirts. What I'm saying is the whole building got behind this new class, right? That's how powerful it was. And that's how quickly it happened. So I knew some people. I was talking to a lady. It was just crazy. You know, another lady heard about it. So the next thing I know, I'm getting a call from the Paul Allen Foundation, and he's going to give 11 awards, right, for teachers on the West Coast to implement something. Well, he heard about this gaming, so he sent his foundation out and did an entire one-day interview. The sadness is that I wasn't selected. I will say I was the only middle school they were looking at. Everybody else was high school. He made, I think, 6 awards. They were all the high schools. But while I was sad about that, the point I want to make about this whole story is it's about the networking, right? The networking is extremely powerful. And in fact, I asked the Paul Allen Foundation how they even heard about me. And they said, well, you know what? Somebody from your organization in Olympia knew you were doing this because they heard it because you told some lady when you were standing. I was attending her conference, and she said, and she happened to say to me, hey, what's new? And I said, oh man, this gaming thing is just crazy. Well, she passed that along, and they passed it on to Paul Allen. And the next thing you know, that's happening. And I will say that now that we're looking at more funding, it has been very powerful to have that connection. So another piece of the story is that at one time I had been a Department of Education teacher fellow, In 2008, 2009, the Department of Ed, and this plays a piece in my story because, again, it'll go to the networking, and it also goes to the fact that no experience is ever wasted. It really isn't, and it's just been really impressive. So in 2008, 2009, I had applied to be a teacher fellow for the Department of Ed because they had said they wanted people to kind of give feedback on policy. Well, No Child Left Behind was right in its at the beginning, and I filled out that application thinking, no, I know how policy affects my students, and I want to have a voice for them at the table, right? Well, crazily enough, I was accepted. I did a phone interview. And the next thing I know, I'm sitting in Washington, D.C. with the First Lady, Laura Bush, and Margaret Spelling, who was the Secretary of Education at the time. But the point is, I remember talking to some people from another organization called Hope Street Group there, and they're a very big player in D.C. in policy. And one of the things they asked me when I met them was, Tammie, how does gaming in policy? I don't understand how it fits, right? And that was powerful to me because I said, you know what, whenever you start to implement something new anywhere, I've learned there's going to be a policy change. And even if there's not a policy change, policymakers are in charge of the funding, right? And so it's big picture, right? You always want to connect all of these parts. Okay, so now having said that, so I was a teacher fellow, and in my mind, okay, I'm a teacher fellow. I did my year. I went to my meetings. I got to go to DC. I got to talk to policymakers. I got trained on what policymakers are looking for when you give them information, that sort of thing. So it was really valuable, but it was very disconnected from this gaming thing I was doing, right? And then something else happened for me. So the Department of Ed ran their teacher fellowship since 2008, 2009. So a couple years ago, in 2013-14, they said, you know what, we want to bring back alum. They have run this program every year and continue to run it. They have run it even when Obama took office, and even though Trump is in office, they are still running this program, right? So one of the things that happened is they said they wanted to do an alumni year where they were looking for alumni only for 1 year. Well, I went back and got interviewed, and even though I didn't get accepted, again, that networking piece is crazy. So the man that's on the left of your screen, his name is Dr. Antero Garcia. The next one over is Joseph South, who worked for the Department of Education. The young gentleman in red is called Eric Martin. He worked for the Department of Education. And then the person on the right is James Liu, who I knew because he was a fellow when I was a fellow. So the two people on the end, Antero and James Liu, they both got accepted to be the next fellow, and I did not. I got a rejection call. But while I was sad about that, I also have to tell you the people they selected were brilliant and amazing, and I just had to smile and say, well, the people they selected are brilliant and amazing. But one of the things that happened is, and again, this networking piece, I'm back waiting for my interview, and the man on the left, Antero Garcia, he teaches in Boulder, Colorado at a university, and he uses gaming in his higher ed processes, and he's a humanities teacher, social studies. And he and I are sitting talking about it, and we are just chatting about what he's doing in higher ed and what I'm doing in 7th grade and in middle school. So the next thing that happens is I leave my job teaching, and I'll see if I've got that slide up. And I'm going to come back to this one. No, I won't. I'm sorry. So what happens is they decide to throw a White House game jam. I had no idea that this was happening. I just was working in my classroom. I was asked to come take a job as an ESD science coordinator, and I applied and got the job. And a science coordinator, and I'll go into this a little bit later about how we expanded, was I work with 59 school districts on science in our state, right? And I'll show you the map of where that is in our state. But in the meantime, I get a call from Eric Martin, the young kid in red, and he says, hey, we're throwing this White House game jam. Can you answer some questions for us about what's going on in classrooms or what is a good fit for classrooms. So I sent him a nice email and thought, okay, well, that was fun. So the next thing that happened is he emailed me back and said, hey, can we be on a conference call with you? Because I want to kind of know what's happening, right? I want to get a better feel. And I say, well, of course, but I have to do it after hours. This is not part of my job anymore, right? I'm a science coordinator now. Okay. So we have a nice hour-long conversation one morning, and Ontario Garcia is on it, Joseph South is on it, Eric Martin is on it, and some other, Zach Chase, some other people from the Department of Ed. Well, I get off the phone call, and the next thing you know, a day later, I get an invitation to the White House. And I emailed back. I said, actually, I think I called James Blue, and I said, so, like, is this a house that's white in D.C., or is this the White House? And he says, no, it's the White House. And he said, we're throwing this game jam, and we think you ought to come be a science consultant. And I said, okay, I can do that. So it was a 3-day event, and well, actually what happened first is I contacted my supervisors and said, yeah, so there's this invitation to the White House. Do we do work there? I mean, I don't even know how my organization fits in. And my leadership was great. In fact, at one point, my boss just looked at me and goes, so you've been invited to the White House? And I said, yeah, I guess. So I don't know what to do with this. But the point is, I went there. They brought together all these game developers. They started Saturday morning. They had until Sunday night to make a game based on Common Core and based on next-gen science standards. So I worked with these companies that were developing games and would talk to them about science content and what was really going on and if it was accurately science, right? So we did that. And then the presentations were on the Monday. Well, before I got back to DC, they had said, hey, would you go ahead and talk? And I thought, well, sure, I can talk about who I am and whatever. Well, when I got back there, it was more of a, hey, Tammie, what are you doing in your classroom? And what I didn't realize is there was only 5 speakers, and 2 were White House representatives and 2 were U.S. Ed representatives, and I was the 5th person. So at that point, I had already said I would do it. So even though I was a little bit hesitant, just because I thought, you know what, I don't mean to be rude, but I'm not a gamer and I'm not a programmer, and here I am talking, but I know how to work with kids, right? So that I do know how to do. So I got to present. It was only a 5 to 8 minute presentation, and that really opened some visibility around gaming for me, right? So people that were building product started connecting with me, and that all started happening. And so some transitional things happened, right? So after that, I came back to my state. Well, this is what happened. So the man on the left is Mark DeLora, and he worked at the White House, and he was at the Game Jam, right? In fact, he and Eric Martin put it on. Well, Mark actually moved to the state of Washington. He moved to Seattle. When he did that, he called me and he said, hey, can we talk, right? So I was over in Seattle for a meeting, and so he and I sat down and started chatting about really what we could do for the whole state. Another transitional thing that happened was the young kid, Eric Martin, in the red shirt, he moved into the White House. So now everything that started happening at the White House was, I got emails. I got notices. And then when some other things would happen, I started getting invitations to come be there and have a voice, right, for what was going on in my state. And then the man on the right is my superintendent. His name is Dr. Mike Dunn. And I'm a science coordinator in this organization, and he's my superintendent. He's 3 levels above me. And he calls me in, and I said, so this is what's going on around gaming. And he said, I think we ought to just make it part of your job. And I said, you want us to do a systems change rollout. I think that's pretty big. And he said, yes, but I think we're the people to do it. We have all the connections. We have all the, we have a history of it. We know the ins and outs of teaching. I mean, we are at like the middle of a perfect storm, right? So anyway, so those are some things that happen that help build where I am. That's, without these 3 people, I just have been given opportunities to do this work. So these are what ESDs are in my state. They're educational service districts. There are 9 of them in our state. I work in the one where the star is. That's Spokane, Washington. And what's going on is, so we have all these science coordinators, but I started doing this computer science stuff. And even though when I took the job, I thought it would not come with me, that work would not come with me, it did. Just because now, like I went to a district a couple months ago and did a science presentation, and two of the people at the table said, hey, we don't want to change the subject, but you're that gaming lady, and we want you to come help us build a program here, which is powerful, right? So I work for Northeast Washington ESD 101 in Spokane, Washington, and I work in this purple region, and I'm going to show you, here are our districts. So in our districts, or in our region, this is a map of our region, and we have 59 school districts. We have the second largest district in our state. It's Spokane Public. They are a very large district, and they have 4 floors of administration that do all their work for them. So they don't play with our organization a lot, simply because they have manpower, right? Of these 59 districts, our bigger districts are located right around here in Spokane. But when you get out in the outskirts and here, up here, across this region, they are very, very rural, right? And when I say rural, we have a district in the south that has 45 kids K-12. So when we started building out, what we said was, we cannot offer the same professional development for districts that have large amounts of people at their beck and call. That's going to look very different than districts that have one computer science teacher K-12 or one librarian, K-12. So here's what we did. We applied for a grant from OSPI. They gave us $360,000. And before we even started doing the work, they heard about some of the stuff we were doing and offered us an extra $25,000. And I said, yeah, we can spend it. We have a plan in place, right? I had already been working on the plan. So we rolled out computer science and gaming all in the same piece. So what we did was, we built elementary professional development, we built middle school and high school, all three very different, because as you know, those are 3 different animals, right? Elementary teachers need something very much integrated. Middle school can be very much different. They have things like electives, they have after school programs, they have, their lives look a little different. And then high school, of course, can look extremely different. Like, again, they can offer electives, but computers and programming and gaming has to look very specific, and just, it ups the ante, right? Because those kids are expecting something a little more. So what we did was, we offer this to entire districts. In fact, I have a presentation tomorrow for an entire middle school staff that has agreed that they want to do this gamification district-wide, right? That's pretty large. We also have individual teachers' professional development. So sometimes I go out and I work with individual teachers and show them gamification, and show them specifically in their classroom what it could look like. And when you're working with individual teachers, different teachers have a different range of comfort. So sometimes I go out and I actually teach the lesson for the teachers, just to show them what it could look like. Sometimes I go out, I had one lady call me, and I went out and she said, I just need you standing in the room for when things go wrong. And I said, I can do that. And by the way, nothing went wrong. And in fact, it worked beautifully. But I'm standing here, and that's what she needed, okay? Another big piece is this administration professional development, right? So when we started working with gamification, that word threw people off. And my own board that I answer, my superintendent answers to a board, they had me do a presentation, and one of the ladies said, the minute you say gamification, that sounds dicey to me. Sounds like you're gaming, we're Vegasing, all these other things. And I say, here's the thing, this is what it's called, and we can rename it. But I think that's going to create some confusion. So let me show you some examples of what gamification looks like. So then what happened is, we realized that districts needed their leadership to take a look, because what happens in schools is if the leadership, I had great leadership, right? My administrator wanted me to teach it the week after I mentioned it to him. That doesn't happen in every school. So we have something here called a Rural Alliance, where 70 or so superintendents, principals get together. They do it 3 times a year. So I was asked to come give a presentation to these people. And what was great is, so now I get everybody in the room. They're all superintendents, they're all leaders, principals, and they're all rural districts. And I get to explain what we mean by gamification. And I get to show them some examples. And I get to show them some of the gains that kids are making and the engagement piece, right? So that was really awesome, in that then I started really getting emails from the people in leadership roles and teachers from those districts, because now their principals and superintendents went back and said, hey, this is a good thing. In fact, I loved it. I went out one day to work with a teacher. He was interested. So I said, hey, I'll come out and show you some things through science, because he's a science teacher. And I get there, and his superintendent, his principal, and his IT guy are all sitting at the table. And he said, hey, sorry, they all wanted to know what was going on, which was great. So I got to talk to them and show them and work with them and move beyond robots, right? Because a lot of gamification is, teachers and people are seeing a lot of robots out there, and that's not a bad thing, but there's so much more they can do. So I started working with this teacher, and my favorite line was, the superintendent looked at me and he said, so like, do the other superintendents in my region know about this? And I said, you know what? I presented, I've sent emails. He said, I think I'm going to reach out to them. See, so on that level, so now I've got all the districts in his region, which I think are about 20 in his specific region, reaching out to me and hearing about this gamification thing. The tech support, same thing. When the tech person showed up there, he said, you know, there's only so much we can do if we're going to do it with computers, right? And of course, gamification doesn't have to be on computers, and it can be. So we started talking about what he would need for his district and his processes and what he would go through, and that made me realize, you know what, I need to be talking to IT people, because they're kind of driving buses in districts. So I went back to my ESD, and we have a tech person named Steve Schreiner, and I reached out to him and said, hey, you work with all the tech people in our districts. Can we do something together? And he said, yes. So he and I have started putting together some presentations for IT people. So he has a meeting once a month, and I go to all his meetings now with all the IT people, so that we can start talking about what this would look like and moving forward. So there's all these people that got involved, and we reached out to them slowly but surely, but they all need to be considered. One of the things I heard a lot about was, hey, you know what, Tammie, this is great, but I don't have any room in my schedule. Some of these districts that are really, really tiny, they just didn't have any room in their schedule. So then I realized, okay, well, we also need to be building an after-school model for these teachers. And the other great thing about after-school programs is that there doesn't have to be standards met. It can really be anything, right? Because that's freedom for them. So we started building PD and models around, if you want to have a gaming club, what that would look like. If you want to have a programming club, what would that look like, and how do we do outreach around that? If you want to do a gaming competition like a game jam, how would that look? So one of the districts that's about 2.5 hours, and that was the other thing, whenever we do PD, we've got districts that are 2 and 3 hours away from us. They can't always send teams, right? We have a sub shortage, we have teacher shortages. So the great thing is I'm allowed and supported to go out to them. So one of my favorite things is I had a principal / superintendent, that's how small this district is. He asked me if I would come out. Well, first of all, he asked me, Tammie, how do I find money? And I said, you know what? I am going to forward you some great grants in our region. That's another thing. Finding funding is important. Well, the good news for Washington State is that we've passed legislation that has said we will teach computer science K-12. They don't care what that looks like right now, but we will do it. Legislation passed, bill went through, and so we have been coming up with models to teach computer science through gaming so that we can access funding, right? because there's a lot of funding out here now around computer science. So we threw in the gaming piece and said, let's go after it. So there were some organizations, and I said, well, here's some funding sources. So he filled out the funding, emailed me when he got it, and then he said, now we need help, right? So we went out, and he said, you know, Tammie, I want to do computer science and gaming in classes, but I also want to create some, like, just something that's free for kids as far as after school, meaning there's no constraints. They can do whatever they want. And I said, we can help you with that. So we started looking at gaming competitions, and we started looking at resources for him. And again, we've become the hub for these resources. So whenever he says, well, I've got a kid that wants to do this, we can connect. Okay. So in the meantime, Girls Make Games reached out to me, Layla Sabir, and she said, hey, can we do some stuff around your region, just because it's growing. And so we connected to her to Girl Scouts. So I went down, and I love it because our Girl Scout lady, Sarah, when I reached out to her and said, hey, I want to do a game jam during the holidays, this was a 1.5 years ago, she said, come on down, we'll provide the manpower, we'll provide everything you need, you just come and do this. So we brought about 6 people down with girls, and this was a learning curve for me, but we brought 6 people down, and girls from kindergarten to 16 were at this facility. And so we broke them up, and we did a mini game jam, and that learning curve was huge because kids were different every day. So, I mean, but it was crazy. So they wanted to do something around sound, which was what their science was focused on. So we built games around sound. So the next thing that's coming for the Girl Scout program for us is we reached out to Filament Games and said, would you build us some kind of mini program that you could come out and deliver for 3 days? And they did. So they're going to bring lady engineers out, and we're getting ready to gear that up for this summer. In the meantime, they are running after school programs, right? So Layla has agreed to come out and do a Girls Make Game Jam for them just in the afternoon. And what I love about her programs is they're affordable. We can afford to get her out here. And so now we're going to connect her to the girls in our region, right? And more to come on that later. So one of the things we decided to do was also do a game jam. So we got a hold of our higher education people, Spokane Falls Community College, said, hey, we'll give you the space. You can do a plugged and unplugged version. We'll do middle school and high school. We're going to model it after the White House Game Jam, and we're going to design it to solve problems, right? Well, I've got to tell you that we planned and planned, and it kind of fell through. We had some glitches around, yes, but transportation is such a huge problem for our districts, right? So we felt like we were getting kids that we couldn't get them here because they're 2.5 hours away on a bus, and then they'd have to stay in a hotel. So we reran this, right? So we worked on it for a year, troubleshot it forever, and it just kind of didn't come through. So then what happened is we contacted the 3 large universities around us, so Gonzaga University, Whitworth University, and Eastern Washington University. And we contacted them because we had contacts with them. Rob Bryant out of Gonzaga University ran a computer science teachers association. We have a club here. It's part of the national CSTA. And we decided we were going to do this. Well, Whitworth donated, I think they donated, good heavens, 12 students to run what we call a Spoke-a-thon. So we found funding, and we decided this is what we're going to do. We're going to run a 24-hour event, high school only, just to see how it goes. We called it Spoke-a-thon, and by the way, what you're seeing on your screen, a student actually designed this for us. We needed a design. We contacted some students, and this was the winning design. So then we got a company called Fellow. It's a creator space, and it's not that we didn't want to run it at Spokane Falls. The space wasn't conducive to what we had in mind. So this company called Fellow, downtown Spokane, they have a makerspace kind of thing where they have a kitchen, they have little mini rooms where people can organize. So we had 50 kids sign up. High school students came on a Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock. They registered, it's $20 registration, just because we wanted to have some skin in the game. The $20, I mean, we scholarshiped any kid that wanted to play that didn't have the $20. And the funding was for things like food and prizes. So we ran it 20 for the kids came, and kids pitched their ideas. And by the way, what you're seeing on the screen, when it was all over, we had kids do a quick survey is, what did you love best? So these are actual quotes from kids, verbatim. So we had kids come in, they pitched their ideas about what they wanted to make a game with, and that's what they did. So then you could join any group. So we had 2 schools that kids kind of stayed to their school group, but the rest of the groups, and we had 8 groups, none of them stayed. They all made these eclectic groups, and they worked on their programming game around anything. We were there to support them. Whitworth University sent, like I said, I think 12 students. They were there through the night with each group had one-on-one help. They were able to, we had a whiteboard up where kids could write down what they needed help with, and we would make sure that an adult went over and helped them learn to program in whatever way they wanted. Here's some more pictures. These are kids that are pitching their ideas about what they want to build games on. And I love this quote, getting the stupid scripts to work. That was an actual quote. I loved it. Yeah, no kidding. So here they are again. They're talking. The space was absolutely perfect. They went on through the night. We provided them pizza for dinner. McDonald's delivered breakfast, and then Subway sandwiches for lunch. And by 2 o'clock, the kids got to vote on who got the awards. And my favorite thing was actually, and by the way, this kid right here on the right is from Germany. He's a German exchange student. And I love it because halfway through the night, he's walking by and he says, you know, you guys in America do the most fun stuff. I thought, being up all night is not exactly what I would call fun. We had 3 people that actually stayed through the night, and I was one of them. But my favorite part was all these comments are around collaboration and making games. We had the winning group made a game around planets and gravitational pull. So they actually created all the graphics, put the music to it, and they had these planets with different gravitational pulls, and their sprites had to learn to jump from one to the other with the exact amount of force you need. I mean, it was amazing. That was the winning game. But there was other ones where there was Candy Mountain or something where the cupcakes were there, and you had to collect sprinkles and the sprite, and there was this beautiful, I mean, the graphics were amazing. So here are the 8, excuse me, here were the 8 projects, and these are little notes when kids needed help, so we knew who to send to where. And my favorite part, and I'm sorry I didn't say that, but the lady from the Hagen Foundation who actually funded us came in, talked to the kids that morning, came up to me and said, do you know what these kids are doing? I said, yeah, it's pretty impressive. And she said, you know, you're doing round 2, right? And I said, oh, we'll be doing round 2, because we decided through the night it was so great that we were going to do it no matter what. So she said, well, I hope you apply for more money because we want to be part of this now. And so that was really powerful in building a program forward. So here is some of the industry outreach that we've done too, because companies need to be a part of the puzzle, right? So the Next Gen Zone is actually an organization within the ESD, and they teach on the fringe kids. So they teach homeless kids, they teach kids that have failed out of school. So we're now reaching out to them and gamifying some of their classrooms. Access to experience, we've got a great guy here who does a lot of work. That access to experience is getting kids experience in companies, a one-on-one internship. College Spark has now founded us for a 3-year research project on gamifying 2 middle schools, entire schools, and we're targeting behavior, we're targeting absences, and around the behavior around that. The Greater Spokane Incorporated is a network that connects all the companies together, and they're highlighting our work, and we're now working with them to get industry support. WASTEM and actually Spokane STEM, same thing. They've heard about our work, and so now we're starting to cross ESD lines. And I've got several other ESDs that have contacted me and said, hey, how do we work on gaming? And so I've gone actually and traveled over there and showed them some of the things we're doing, and now they're giving workshops. And Thank you for your time. I am about 10 minutes till, I think. So I would love to take any questions, comments, or concerns.
You can type in your questions in the chat box. Thank you, Anne.
Oh, thank you. And here's my email if you ever want to. I mean, trust me, I am not the end all be all. I just know that I just got caught in a certain place at a certain time, and teachers are really excited